The worst part about growing bonsai is all the fertilizer you need. And some say any shit will do. But did you know there's 4.5 types of fertilizer that you could use? Do you know when to use which? And more importantly, when using the wrong kind of fertilizer can actually kill your tree? Join me in this video. I'll highlight the 4.5 types of fertilizer, their use, when not to use it, and until then, I'll make sure I'll take this fertilizer and put it back where it belongs. Because truly, I'm not giving this to my trees. So, talking about fertilizers and the different types of fertilizers, I think it is important to realize that there's two main types of fertilizers. And one of them is mineral and the other one is organic. Of course, with wind it doesn't work to have papers laying around. This is all from a previous video I did on nutrients, fertilizers. Let me just put those away because we're not going to talk about that again. So yeah, where were we? So we have mineral fertilizers and we have organic fertilizers. Now, if you look at these things, there's two main differences, and this is in the origin of the minerals. Mineral fertilizers typically come from stones or from industry, and they contain the nutrients in as pure a form as possible. Organic fertilizers have an animal or plant origin, and typically all the nutrients are still connected to carbohydrates. So they are in much more complex organic structures that need to be broken down before they can be used. These, however, typically, once you add water to it, the nutrients dissolve and can straight away be picked up by the plant. Which actually brings me to another point. These are both solid. So we have solid fertilizers and we have liquid fertilizers. Now, one of the liquid fertilizers would be this liquid. This is ground up animal rests. It is very smelly and I cannot recommend using this when you're in a very, very dense urban area. My garden is a little bit more remote and I'm lucky enough that all the flies and all the animals that it attracts, they don't reach my neighbors. Now then, if we look at a liquid fertilizer with a mineral background, you typically end up with something that comes in a bottle and you just find in your supermarket. Looks a little bit like this. This is your normal day-to-day fertilizer bottles that you normally would find in your supermarket or hardware store. So there you have it. 4 types of fertilizer. Now let's take a look at these from a little bit of a different perspective. So we have mineral fertilizer, we have organic fertilizers, we have solid and we have liquid fertilizer. Now, what can we say about the origin of the fertilizer? So if we talk about mineral fertilizers, the origin is typically from rocks, industry, etc. Now, if you look at organic fertilizers, the origin typically is animal, plant products. And that could be the excrement, or that could be body parts. And that includes bones, nails, blood. And for plants, that could be the whole plant or seed. So that's origin. Now, if we look at how quickly can it be taken up. So wait time. Then for minerals, immediate. Whereas for organics, this could be weeks. What happens is that here you have salts. They can be diluted and they can be taken up by plant. Here we have organic compounds. And what these require is, for instance, bacteria or fungi for breaking it down. So that takes a long time. So there's a clear difference in how these can be used. Now, how long are these valid for? Typically, long lasting for the organic and short lasting for mineral. This is directly related to the wait time. Here you have salts which easily are diluted, and with that, whenever you water, part of these salts flush out. Whereas if you take the organic compounds, they're more complex, but they also stick better to the substrate and therefore they wash out less easily. Especially if you use the solid organics, it is very long lasting. Now, what are the pros and the cons of the different types? And here I would like to look at all the individual ones. So if you look at the mineral solids, the pro, it's easy to use, no smell, and uptake is good, fast uptake. The downside, short-lived. That is an L. Short-lived, but even more importantly, and I'm going to put an exclamation mark there, risk of root damage. What happens is that if you put these sort of pellets that I have here, you put those directly onto the soil. The water dissolves them, the salts go into the soil, and then the pot dries out. That means you have a very, very high concentration of salts all of a sudden in the pot. So using these pellets needs to be done with extreme care. I hardly ever use them because I find often the risk is too big. I only use them in very, very big containers. Or I use just 1 or 2 of these kernels on the edge of the pot when it's going to be rainy. So for me, solid mineral, I don't really like them for bonsai. Now if we go to the solid organics, then we are talking these tiny little pellets here. The pros are hard to over-fertilize. So the big downside of this one is an upside here, hard to over-fertilize. Writing is so difficult for me. The downside is, of course, it takes a long time, long wait. Another downside is, because they need to decompose, they need to stay moist. So you need to find a way to keep these moist for the duration of the use of the product. I'll get back to that in a second. Needs to be moist to work. Needs water to work. Now if we go to mineral liquid. Oh no, let's go back to the organic. So I think this is 2 arrows up. I'm going to put 1 arrow up. No, I'm going to put 2 arrows up for the liquid mineral. That is that if you use and dilute as instructed, otherwise you have the same risk as you have here, root burn. But then it is easy to use. It lasts a short time, so that's a negative. Short-lived, but taken up easily. So that's a positive. Now if we look at the organic liquid, I'm just going to put one up. It has all the benefits and the downsides of the organic solids. So it is long lasting. Hard to over fertilize. And unfortunately it is also a long wait for it to use. And it needs moist soil. But I think you just saw what happened. It attracts a lot of flies. It smells horribly. I can smell it here. And that means that it only gets one arrow up. So this is it. This is the overview of the 4 kinds of fertilizer. But now I've been cheating. And I've been cheating because there's another one. And that is the Foliar fertilizer. As you can tell from the little bottle, you don't use a lot of it. Typically you only use maybe 1 milliliter in a whole spray can of water, and you spray it on top of the leaves. This is not very different from these, because effectively this is exactly where it should be. It is a liquid mineral fertilizer, but it's not put on the soil, it is put directly on the foliage. But because that's the only one that you apply directly to the foliage, I did not make it a separate category. So foliar fertilizer is a liquid mineral fertilizer that is sprayed directly on the leaves itself. And when it hits the leaves, it is directly taken up into the leaf. As such, the roads from application to the areas where it is most needed are very short, so it is very fast. The risk, however, it is pure salt in water. If you spray this on your leaves and you do it in sun, then the leaves will burn. And even if you don't do it in full sun, some plants are very sensitive to it, like a Japanese maple can very easily get brown tips. So a risk is foliage burn. There's a big dispute on whether it works or not. Some people swear by the use, others say there's no way that plant can take it up. If you look in agricultural journals, you will find that foliar feeding does work. It does have an effect on the plant and the plant will take it up. It is, however, not a replacement for the bulk of the nutrients. It's really only focusing on small, short, additional fertilizers, say when plants are not doing that well, have weak roots, and you want to boost them a little bit. But be careful, read up on it before you do it, because this is not something that can easily go right. It is something that can easily go wrong. So I'm going to do the plus minus. It works for some. I try to avoid it. I do use it, but not all that much. And then there was the question on how do you deal with these kernels or pellets of organic fertilizer that need to stay moist. For this they've invented fertilizer baskets. They serve 2 purposes. 1, animals can't take it away all that easily, although it is not uncommon that animals take the whole fertilizer basket. The second is to keep your fertilizer in and keep it moist. And what you do, you have the basket, you take some organic material that stays long for a long time. Often sphagnum moss is used, this is cocoa peat, and then on top you put your organic fertilizer. You can indeed add another bit of organic in there, then you close it, and this you just put in the pot, like that. Then every time you water also over the basket, keeping everything in there moist, therefore fungi and bacteria can develop. And every time you water, you wash a little bit of the nutrients out of this pot into your rain container. That was it. It's been a bit of a mess. I hope there were some elements that were new to you, and see you next time. Keep growing bonsai.